and declare the meeting of the Political Committee at the 2017 spring session of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly open. First of all, I want to warmly welcome all of our members, our associate members of the Political Committee, as well as our speakers and observers. I think all of you will join me in thanking our hosts. They've done a marvelous job. In the first 3 days that we've been here, we've had several outstanding receptions and dinners, and the organization has been outstanding. So we want to thank our hosts here from Georgia for doing such a great job to welcome our NATO Parliamentary Assembly. I think those of us who have been here before know that, among other things, the Georgians are famous for their hospitality, and we've seen that demonstrated. Before we start our business, just a few administrative notices. I want to remind all of the red badge wearers, our delegates, that you need to sign the register outside the room just to record that you are here. We need that for our records, so please do that if you haven't done that already. We will have 2 short coffee breaks, one at 11:15 and also this afternoon at 4:30. Lunch will be between 1 and 2:30 p.m. and we hope to conclude our meeting at around 6 p.m. Basically, that's up to you how much and how long you want to keep the discussion going, but that's the plan right now. If you have any questions at all about the meeting, the person to ask is the person sitting to my right, Stephen Sachs, and our coordinator, Karen Walker-Love. They have all the answers, so if you need any information, they can help you out. We have a very good session planned today. We have 3 outstanding speakers. They will be presenting to our committee during the day. They include, and this will be our first speaker very shortly, is His Excellency the Foreign Minister of Georgia, Mikheil JANELIDZE. Later we will have Marcus Keim from the German Institute for International and Security Affairs, and Professor Soli Ozel of the Kadir Has University in Istanbul. We have biographies for all the speakers. They're available on our website. And all their speeches and presentations will be uploaded onto the site by the end of the day. Now, one of the first orders of business is to adopt the draft agenda. Are there any comments? Are there any suggestions? If not, and I don't see any, then can we assume that the draft agenda has been adopted? Thank you. Similarly, we have to adopt a summary of the meeting of the Political Committee held in Istanbul, Turkey on Saturday 19 and Sunday the 20th of November last year in 2016. And so are there any modifications or any changes to the summary of that meeting in Istanbul, Turkey? I don't see any changes, so we then can adopt the minutes as written. Thank you. And finally, we have consideration of the comments of the Secretary General of NATO, the Chairman of the North Atlantic Council, on the policy recommendations adopted in 2015 by the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. You all have this document before you. As always, we truly appreciate the Secretary General's thoughtful replies to our resolutions, and especially on the resolution that was generated by this political committee. Is there anyone who wishes to react to the Secretary General's comments on the policy recommendations adopted by the Assembly in 2016? I don't see anyone, so thank you. We will then move on to the first presentation, and that is the presentation by the Foreign Minister of Georgia, Mikheil JANELIDZE, on Georgia's foreign and security priorities. Prior to serving as Minister of Foreign Affairs, he was Deputy Minister of Economy and Sustainable Development and Georgia's Chief Trade Negotiator with the EU and Chairman of Intergovernmental Economic Commissions. His experience is deep and vast, especially working with our European countries and Transatlantic Alliance. He was awarded the Order of Honor for his outstanding contribution to the development of foreign trade and international economic relations. And with that, it's my honor to present the Foreign Minister of Georgia, Mikheil JANELIDZE. Minister, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for these very kind words about the Georgian hospitality. Honorable members of the Parliamentary Assembly, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure and honor to welcome you all to Georgia and extend my sincere gratitude for choosing Tbilisi as a venue for the spring session of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. The government, political leadership, and most importantly, people of Georgia highly appreciate and value this decision, and decision which is a powerful message of support which the North Atlantic Alliance extends to our country. Since the day we regained our independence about 26 years ago, Georgia has been aspiring to join, or rather rejoin, the European and Euro-Atlantic community of nations with whom we share the common history, culture, and values. These aspirations, which were defined by the resolute choice of the overwhelming majority of our people, manifested Georgia's declared foreign policy goal of fully fledged integration into the NATO and the EU. Over the last years, Georgia has made great strides to make its European and Euro-Atlantic dreams come true. We have implemented a series of fundamental reforms that transformed Georgia into a modern European country with vibrant political life, rule of law, open governance, media pluralism, growing economy, and favorable investment environment. Georgia has moved up of the rankings in virtually all aspects pertaining to democratization and liberalization. This has been done in close cooperation with our Western partners, with great support of the European Union, of the members of the alliance, our strategic partner, United States, and our friends, which during these 26 years have committed their financial technical assistance to Georgia and helped us to transform into a truly democratic state. Georgia progresses well on its way to NATO integration, especially when it comes to the practical aspects of the process using the NATO-Georgia Commission, Annual National Program, and NATO-Georgia Substantial Package. I would like to thank all allied and partner countries who are contributing to the SNGP, NATO-Georgia Substantial Package. Through our joint efforts, we created a tangible, visible NATO footprint in Georgia, Joint Training and Evaluation Center, and the Defense Institution Building School have become operational. There are 15 ongoing projects under the SNGP, and more than 30 experts of NATO work in Georgia. Allow me to emphasize that along with the values, we as well share threat perceptions with the alliance. Georgia has been actively contributing to the common Euro-Atlantic security, particularly through its sustained engagement in Afghanistan. Georgia has also been actively involved in a number of EU-led crisis management missions in the Central African Republic, Mali, and until May 2016 in Ukraine. The allied decisions and Warsaw Summit to bolster NATO's collective defense and deterrence reflect the changed security environment in the Euro-Atlantic area. As an aspirant country and a reliable partner, Georgia supports NATO's enhanced tailored presence in the Black Sea region and is ready to contribute to the efforts of the alliance in this regard. We pursue NATO integration with diligence and perseverance, which enabled the allies to recognize that Georgia has all practical tools to prepare for the membership. We will continue on this road with the same vigor in order to accomplish the quest of the Georgian people and become the fully fledged member of the alliance. I would like to emphasize the critical importance of continuation of NATO open door policy. Taking forward Georgia's NATO membership process would be the right step in this direction, which would send a strong signal that re-emergence of the spheres of influence and attempts to limit the foreign policy choice of sovereign states are unacceptable and indeed impossible in the 21st century. The European Union represents the major institution to ensure Georgia's development as a sustainable democracy. Through the ambitious association agreement that fully applied last July and its attendant deep and comprehensive free trade areas, Georgia has further solidified its reform efforts. The effective and full implementation of the agreement remains a top priority of the government of Georgia. The benefits of Georgia's in-depth cooperation with the EU are visible. During these 2 years since the application of the Deep and Comprehensive Free Trade Area Agreement, European Union has become number one trading partner for Georgia. And in the first quarter of this year, we have more than 30% growth of our exports to the EU market. Visible are the reforms and results in all sectors of Georgia by strengthening political and democratic and economic life of Georgia. After completing all the benchmarks of the Visa Liberalization Action Plan, the European Commission concluded in late 2015 that Georgia deserves a visa-free regime. And 2 months ago, Georgian citizens were granted this opportunity to travel to the Schengen countries visa-free. This truly historic event brought Georgia significantly closer to Europe, its natural habitat. Beyond being a manifest recognition on the part of the European Union of our thorough and comprehensive reforms, the visa-free regime will facilitate professional contacts between businessmen, scholars, students, as well as boost people-to-people interactions. Our current ambition is to gradually reach the level of integration where we would be able to say that this is really everything but institutions, leaving a political decision on the membership open to political decision. Hence, in practical terms, our plans include intensified legal and institutional approximation with the EU, enhanced cooperation with the EU specialized agencies and programs, deepening sectorial cooperation and expanding interconnections, as well as intensifying cooperation in security and defense. Meanwhile, more and more Georgian products, as I already mentioned, find way on the European market. Georgia is an associated partner to a number of important EU programs, such as Horizon 2020 and Creative Europe, which further contribute to deepening our education and cultural ties with the EU, scientific ties, which represents benefit not only to Georgians, but also to the EU institutions, EU citizens, benefiting with the cooperation with Georgian institutions and scientific institutions. We also work hard to raise awareness about Georgia in the member states and opportunities with the cooperation with Georgia. In this connection, the association agreement is not the final goal of our relationship. Rather, through comprehensive political association and economic integration, we create a solid ground for Georgia's deeper political integration into the Union. All in all, Georgia has become one of the leading regional countries in terms of implementation of EU standards, serving an eloquent success story and setting a positive example of what political will and support can accomplish. Georgia's quest to the West is taking place under the conditions of compromised territorial integrity and security. As you are well aware, 20% of internationally recognized territory of Georgia is still under Russian occupation. Abkhazia and Tkhinvali region remain heavily militarized areas as Moscow pursues intensive military buildup by deploying massive offensive forces with sophisticated weaponry and conducting large-scale military exercises in both occupied regions in violation of the 12th August 2008 ceasefire agreement. It is all the more concerning that Russia declines to reciprocate to Georgia's unilateral non-use of force pledge. Russia continues the process of preparing ground for annexation through integration of the occupied territories into Russia's political, military, economic, and social systems by signing and implementing the illegal so-called treaties with the occupation regimes. As a result of occupation, the Georgian territory is being crisscrossed by barbed wire fences, while kidnappings and provocations along the occupation line is a usual occurrence, just as the discrimination and abuse of Georgian population. Instruction in the Georgian language has been banned everywhere in the Gali district, leaving children without mother tongue education a fundamental human right. Furthermore, the occupied territories are inaccessible for the international monitors. The EU monitoring mission, the only international mission on the ground, is denied the right of entry to the occupied territories, thus being hampered from implementing its mandate. It should be said, however, that despite this illegitimate limitation, the mission has been doing a remarkable job in reporting all human rights violations and unlawful detentions, as well as providing a quick and objective account on provocations. Despite these provocative steps, our country, our government steadily follows the policy of peaceful conflict resolution, relying exclusively on political and diplomatic means. Our government is committed to the policy of reconciliation and rapprochement of the population divided by the conflict, and occupation lines through the dialogue, confidence building, and people-to-people contacts. We are determined to make all the benefits of Georgia's European agenda available for our fellow citizens beyond the occupation line. And when we talk about the peaceful conflict resolution policy, it's not only declared policy, it's an implemented policy, it is a visible policy, and it is a strong signal to the alliance and to everyone that Georgia is fully committed to to international rules, to international norms, and sees only one way of peaceful conflict resolution. Dear colleagues, in the modern international relations, active cooperation with trans-regional and transcontinental partners, both on bilateral and multilateral formats, are key to the effective diplomacy. Georgia's political maturity and economic openness with virtually non-existent corruption render it an attractive partner to many countries from all corners of the globe. There is no global region without Georgia's diplomatic presence and economic projects. Georgia has been effectively employing its strategic location at the crossroads of major trade and transportation routes, as its regional projects have the implications for Europe's energy security and better connectivity between Europe and Asia. In the era of globalized economies, common markets, and free trade agreements, active economic diplomacy is crucial for sustainable economic growth. About a year ago, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and in tandem with the Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development, launched a far-reaching economic diplomacy project which has already borne fruit as a number of important economic deals have been signed, most notable being the mentioned DCFTA with the EU and the free trade agreement with China. Georgia represents a unique country having free trade agreement with Turkey, with the European Union, with EFTA countries, with all the CIS countries, and now with China. And we've launched also preparatory talks for an FTA with India. Georgia's international outreach and development will be greatly assisted by strengthening the ties between our institutions and the ethnic Georgians living abroad. Our goal is to enhance diaspora's cultural ties with Georgia, as well as their contribution to the country's trade and economic development relations. Ladies and gentlemen, it is highly symbolic that the dates chosen for this session of the Parliamentary Assembly coincide with the Independence Day of Georgia, as well as of Armenia, Azerbaijan on May 28th, and I want to congratulate both on that. As we commemorate the 99th anniversary of independent Georgian Republic, who aspired hard to join the civilized world a century ago, we also remember how this short-lived independence was taken from them. It was the Soviet-Russian army that rolled in Georgia in 1921 and enslaved them into the Soviet bondage for the subsequent 70 years. Unfortunately, near a century later, Russia's revisionist foreign policy agenda once again threatens the peaceful and prosperous development of Georgia, and in fact the whole region. Viewing the international relations in an increasingly zero-sum approach, Russia still pursues the absolute spheres of influence approach only to prevent the ongoing neighboring countries to westernize and modernize politically. Aggressive policies supported by massive disinformation campaign, which aims at discrediting values, misinterpreting policies and facts, and targeting foundation of the societies. Black Sea region has been one of the primary targets of this strategy. We all know about Russia's long-standing policy against the regional countries, ranging from political pressure to energy sabotage to full-blown economic blockade. However, the August 2008 marked a shift towards Russia's even more alarming foreign policy agenda, which envisages changing the borders in Europe by pursuing either factual or full-scale annexation of the territories of sovereign states. Ladies and gentlemen, together with these threats, at the same time, we see the horrible terrorist attack at Manchester, Iran, and other terrorist attacks, which is yet another reminder of the diversity of threats, from conventional to asymmetric to hybrid, which the civilized world faces today. In a modern world, not a single country or even a powerful military alliance is immune to security challenges. Only sustained, concerted efforts of international society might tackle such a multitude and magnitude of threats. These efforts require commitment, resources, patience, and of course, political will. Under the current circumstances, we believe it is critical that both NATO and the EU remain united and determined in ensuring the Euro-Atlantic security. There is a clear need for NATO and the like-minded partners to intensify cooperation and develop common approaches in order to identify and address the existing challenges, including in the Black Sea region. On its part, Georgia will continue cooperation with the alliance aimed at strengthening our common security. At the same time, in the face of complex security environment, the success stories of Georgia, as well as other regional countries, serve as a major boost to the soft power and transformative potential of the West. In this context, we believe it is critical that NATO and the EU embrace the European and Euro-Atlantic aspirations of the regional countries. And again, I would like to reiterate that taking forward Georgia's NATO membership process would be the right step in this direction, which would send a strong signal that reemergence of the spheres of influence and attempts to limit the foreign policy choice of sovereign states are unacceptable and indeed impossible in the 21st century. I thank you for your attention, and I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. I think you did an outstanding job in presenting the fact that I think Georgia has done everything necessary to be a success story. And perhaps the only way to complete that success story is to have the rest of us help you to finally join this European and transatlantic community. And I hope we can accomplish that somewhere in the near future. We have an opportunity for a few questions to the Minister. So far I have three, and we'll start with Julio Miranda Calha from Portugal.
Thank you, President. And I'm very glad to hear the presentation of Minister of Foreign Affairs. I would like to put only two questions to you. First one is related to the process of integration in NATO. I noticed that there are some substantial reforms that are necessary to develop, and reforms related to independent judiciary, preserving media pluralism, as well as enhancing dialogue and reducing tensions between the ruling and opposition parties. How is the state of the art in this area? And second is related to the Geneva talks. How is the process at this moment also? Because we understand that in this region we have a lot of frozen conflicts, and we don't like that this one could be another frozen conflict. I think that we must have an idea about the sovereignty of Georgia, and we welcome very much the integration in NATO of Georgia. And you have here in this room, of course, great supporters of that integration. But at the same time, we would like to understand how is the state of the art in the area of the Geneva talks, because if there is a solution, a political solution, anyway, it must be developed in this area and in this context in Geneva. Thank you very much.
We have two other questions, and I think what we'll do is let the other two delegates speak and then let the minister respond to all three. So the next speaker would be Rasa Yuknevichian from Lithuania, followed by Mr. Nehapetyan from Armenia. So, Rasa,
thank you,
please.
Chairman. Thank you very much, Minister. Really very interesting, your thoughts. And my question will be very open and frank. Many experts and politicians inside NATO still are convinced that membership action plan provided to Georgia would provoke Russia. What would be your answer to such concerns? Don't you think that Russia is spreading fear, thinking or expecting that people, societies in the Western countries, and of course decision makers somehow will be afraid to take further steps towards your membership?
And finally, Mr. Nehapetyan from Armenia. Please.
Minister, thanks for your presentation. Thank you also for your congratulations on National Holiday of Armenia, the Day of Republic, which we are celebrating today. I would like to express my sincere appreciation that Georgia has made a good progress in implementing legal, political, and institutional reforms. I value also your active engagement directed towards deepening of relations between Armenia and Georgia. During your frequent visits to Armenia, a wide range of bilateral and regional issues has been discussed, and basis has been outlined for effective cooperation, including on interparliamentary level. Considering that Georgia has already presented 2017 annual national program, and Armenia has approved new IPAP under NATO's Partnership for Peace program, how do you see the perspective of identifying common areas in the Georgian AMP and Armenian IPOP, and implement joint projects aimed at reforms in defense and security sectors. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the questions. So I'll start answering in a relevant order. First of all, it was mentioned democratic reforms and need for further progress. As I already said in my opening remarks, Georgia has achieved great progress during last years, especially in building a truly democratic state. We managed to actually transform society, political life into a real open and vibrant political life. We managed to strengthen the judiciary. We managed to open media environment, which was fully controlled and was limited. We also ensured that there is full political dialogue among the political parties, and I will provide all examples for that. So this is not my evaluation, but this is evaluation of the international organizations. But I will provide relevant information about the reforms, for instance, in the judiciary. In the judiciary, we have implemented 3 waves of reforms during these last 4 years, and those reforms opened judiciary fully, ensured its independence, and actually implementation of standards which are not even in some Western countries, such as democratic and very clear standards oriented on independence. Now, just a week ago, we have elaborated a strategy together with the GIZ, together with USAID, with the Council of Europe, 5-year strategy on the implementation of these legislative reforms in the judiciary to make judiciary stronger, more professional, and able to ensure this independence which is provided by the law and by the legislation. This 5-year strategy has been elaborated by the judiciary system itself, which makes this reform even and this strategy even more important, together with the civil society, NGOs, and international partners. And this strategy is also followed by the relevant action plan, 2-year action plan, and it will be implemented in line with our international obligations. With regards to media pluralism, we have today 13 or more nationwide broadcasters. We have achieved the highest freedom of internet. We have achieved that all media outlets are critical and not controlled by the government, and there is full access of political parties, political opponents, experts, or NGOs to the media space, thus ensuring the freedom of speech in Georgia, which is critical to democracy, to which this government is adhered to, and which drives our country to Europe and to Euro-Atlantic space. With regards political dialogue, the best example is our constitutional reform. First of all, this is again another indication of how Georgia is moving towards more European democracy. We are establishing a truly European constitution, moving to the parliamentary system, which is based on European principles. First of all, in this process, there has been a commission created, which has included in its work political opposition in the parliament, outside of non-parliament opposition, also experts, NGOs. There was a commission composed of 72 members, if I'm not mistaken. Constitution has, this Constitutional Commission has prepared a draft, which is one of the most progressive, I would say, even in Europe, because it includes very progressive parts and provisions like social rights, environmental rights, human rights. The idea of the new draft constitution is to ensure more independence of the judiciary, to ensure more checks and balances, and at the same time to ensure that there is full accountability of the government against the parliament. Even prime minister's powers are minimized when it comes to the non-confidence vote. So it is a constitution truly giving rights to parliament. At the same time, it is the first time when the ruling party decided to actually say no to the majoritarian system, which is a district vote, which is about 50% of the parliamentary seats. It was never possible during the previous governments and ruling party systems in Georgia, although it was always an issue of big political debate in Georgia during these 26 years. Now this new draft offers this opportunity. And where I started about that, about these constitutional reforms because you asked about the political dialogue. So it is the first time, I think, when it was clearly stated that by the chairman and by the prime minister that we, first of all, will take on board the recommendations of the Venice Commission, and with the Venice Commission together, we are working with the experts of the Venice Commission together. We are working together with the political opposition, together with the experts and NGOs. Last week, 2 days were spent in Berlin by the chairman of the parliament, together with the representatives of the opposition, NGOs and experts, together with the Venice experts, talking about the political and the constitutional reforms we are implementing. At the same time, there were around the country political debates organized in front of the public, where all opposition and ruling party was present and debating on the constitutional changes. So I think it shows the vibrant political life in Georgia and open opportunities for contributions from all the political sides. And most important also in the Constitution is that there was a full political consensus on inclusion of European and Euro-Atlantic path of Georgia as a constitutional provision. So there are many very progressive parts of this new in this new draft, and it has been a result of this political dialogue and readiness of the ruling party to be open in that dialogue. When it comes to Geneva and conflict with Russia, Geneva international talks are talks which have been established after the August War of 2008. the major issues which are discussed in Geneva format. These are the issues related to non-use of force, creation of international security arrangements on the ground in the occupied territories, and issues related to internally displaced persons. We have EU special representative in that format. We have OEC special representative and UN special representative, together with the United States represented in these talks. Unfortunately, due to the destructive approach and absolutely non-constructive approach from the Russian Federation, there is no progress on these major issues in this format in Geneva talks. Before reaching a political settlement, as you mentioned, at least we need to ensure that those very basic needs for security and humanitarian issues are addressed properly and are addressed in accordance to international law and international principles, which is the legitimate request of the Georgian side on every round of Geneva talks. Unfortunately, we are holding already 40th round of Geneva talks, but these talks are not leading to actually the solutions of these major issues. Although these talks actually during last year have been used to re-establish incident prevention and response mechanism in Gali, for instance. This kind of mechanism works also for Tskhinvali region, and this is a mechanism for preventing and then also reacting on some incidents which are happening on the ground, and unfortunately these incidents are still happening. But we are very grateful to the work of the UMM, which is, as I mentioned already, is the only international monitoring body now in Georgia. Unfortunately, they are not allowed to fulfill their mandate, and therefore there is need of more international pressure on Russia to allow the entry and access of international monitors to the occupied territories. We had very strong support of the Council of Europe with a recent decision. We had also, which recognized also the first time within the international organizations, it was first time when it was Russia's actions in the occupied territories, the effectual control of the territories and occupation has been recognized, and that Russian military presence is the cause of the problems, humanitarian violation of human rights, as well as not allowance of international monitoring on the ground, as well as a recent resolution of March 2017 of the Human Rights Council. Already for more than 2 years, Human Rights Commissioner, High Commissioner, is requesting access to the occupied territories, but unfortunately he is not provided access to the occupied territories. And we were grateful for the support of the Human Rights Council and other members joining this cause and call on the need of entry of High Commissioner for Human Rights to assess the human rights situation on the ground. So we hope that with these international decisions of the organizations, the principles of which Russia adheres to, Russia will comply and allow to act in a way which will lead to the solutions, to finding the solutions. We are very much oriented on finding a political settlement of this conflict, and settlement in a peaceful way. And here in this public, I have to mention that there should not be feeling and understanding that either our North Atlantic integration or our activities oriented on further defense cooperation is oriented on the idea of involving anyone in a military conflict with Russia. We don't think, and we have clearly stated that we are going to solve this conflict peacefully, and we are going to solve this conflict by using our European integration and Euro-Atlantic integration as a point of gravity and attraction for all living in the whole territory of Georgia as a place, as a way to live in a free world, live in a free society, live in a country which respects human rights, which respects the major values which are important for the humanity in the 21st century. When it comes to map, it is the same story which we are hearing already for many years, and this is the narrative which is developed by Russia, definitely. But again, you know, will it be map or membership? It's not against Russia. Our NATO membership, it's about Georgia's security. It's about our sovereign choice to be part of the free world, to be part of the world which shares the same values. It's not against anyone. And it's about creating stability, security, not only in Georgia, but also in the region. So we need not map, we don't need map, we need membership. So map is not the final goal for Georgia. We need membership in NATO in order to ensure stability, security, and sustainable development for our country, for the region, and thus creating stability and prosperity for everyone in the region. This is our idea, this is our intention, and I think it's time to realize that what we are talking now and we've been talking about is a real policy also implementing that policy we are pursuing, Georgians are pursuing. With regards cooperation with Armenia, we have excellent relations with Armenia. We are building our bilateral ties, and we believe that there are areas where we can cooperate, and there was a recent visit of the Minister of Defense, new Minister of Defense of Armenia to Georgia. We are also, our ministers are frequently visiting Armenia, and we have high-level also exchange on the Prime Minister's level and President level. So I'm not an expert of the defense cooperation, but I think this issue can be discussed with the Ministry of Defense. So, thank you.
Okay, I think we have two more questions, one from Georgi Kandalaki, and then I just wanted to conclude with one. So, please, Georgi.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you, Minister, for your presentation. Since I'm the only one in this room from opposition, and certainly I don't want to bring our internal politics here, but nevertheless, very quickly in a couple of sentences, I think a couple of issues have to be touched, and also I have a question on some of the issues you raised. Certainly, Georgia and Georgian democracy is much ahead of some of the other countries in Eastern Partnership. That is very much true. And Georgia overall continues movement on this path. But nevertheless, devil is in details, and not recognizing some of the worrying tendencies would be disservice to Georgia and its aspirations. The good news about Georgia is that it is true, the minister mentioned, the public opinion in Georgia remains overwhelmingly pro-European, pro-NATO, pro-Western. It is somewhat shrinking, unfortunately, and there too is a worrying tendency, but it is overwhelmingly pro-Western, and therefore Georgia's friends, such as this institution, have great leverage over what happens in Georgia, and indeed this leverage has been used more than a couple of times to stop trouble. So you, dear friends, have a lot of leverage to help Georgian government and the country as a whole to do the right thing and not to do wrong things, let's say. And to the credit of our government, most of the time when the international community has spoken on problems, and some of these problems are grave, again, not least because of this public opinion, the government has listened and has taken the criticism on board. And let me just very, very quickly, I know we are very short of time, run through some of the most acute issues. On media pluralism, I have to disagree. There is only one mainstream media outlet that is outside the control of the government, that is Rustavi 2. Many of you know that story, which, and we've had for a couple of years an attempt by government and by Mr. Ivanishvili, who, and that's a separate problem, is the decision maker of the government, while outside the constitutional framework, to grant the ownership of this TV station to a government proxy, like Putin did with NTV, and in an unprecedented move, the European Court of Human Rights, first time in its history, intervened with a provisional measure and suspended the execution of the judgment of the Georgian court. The European Court of Human Rights has never ever done that on cases of freedom of expression. It has only done so in cases related to threat of life and similar cases, also very, very rarely. So that shows the attitude towards the state of affairs in the Georgian judiciary system. And I'm very happy that the Georgian government has listened and has not ignored the decision of the European Court. And we hope that it will continue so. And this unprecedented intervention of the European Court of Human Rights has saved Georgia from major trouble and major turmoil. The European Court of Human Rights has also ruled first time in relation to Georgia, and seventh time in its own history violation of Article 18 in relation to a major political figure who is currently in jail, former Prime Minister Vano Merabishvili, and who is the author of the famous Georgian police reform. The Georgian police doesn't take bribes is the result of his reform. Article 18 is the so-called political article that the authorities had hidden agenda and ulterior motives while prosecuting that person, which means that he is a political prisoner. The decision has been appealed by the government in the Grand Chamber, and we hope that once the Grand Chamber of the European Court of Human Rights publishes its final verdict, the government will respect that judgment. On judiciary, you know, in countries with whose past we try to emulate, when governments changed, that change represented an opportunity for strengthening the independence of the judiciary. In previous years, when we succeeded in cleaning up judiciary from corruption, because like many other institutions, there was rampant corruption in judiciary when judges took bribes, large amounts of bribes, and let's say the only independence was if judge took bribe from one party and then the other party would offer higher bribe, the judge would honor the first agreement. And that was the independence of the judiciary. We cleaned the judiciary from independence, but not from dependence. So it was not corrupt, but it was not independent. Now it's neither. And we hear voices from various international business circles and chambers of commerce that now we have cases of corruption, and certainly these verdicts of the European Court show is also a verdict on how independent Georgian judiciary is, and that this window of opportunity has been missed. Violence is a problem. Exactly 1 year ago, we had huge attack by government-organized athletes on opposition figures, and we had many cases of such attacks in campaign period. Prime Minister promised investigation, but no one has been punished. 5 days before elections, we had car explosion of a major political figure in downtown Tbilisi, and the person who was convicted of storing large amounts of explosives which were used in this explosion was given a probation. So that raises a question. Finally, final points on constitutional reform, which is the most acute issue of the day, and the minister correctly focused on that, but we diverge on interpretation. Moving to proportional system is good. We applaud that. That's a good thing for the country. But the problem is the so-called unlimited bonus. In the system that is proposed, if Party A gets 20%, Party B gets 19%, and Party C gets 16%, let's say. Parties B and C can form a coalition, of course, but in this system, all wasted votes go to Party A, and Party A can get constitutional majority because the government wants to maintain 5% threshold and prohibit blocks. Per se, it's okay. Many of your countries have 5% thresholds. In some democracies, blocks are prohibited, but all these things together ensure maximization of wasted votes. And finally, on the parliamentary oversight. Of course, in theory, we are a parliamentary system, and basic cornerstone of parliamentary system is parliamentary oversight and parliamentary scrutiny. Unfortunately, ministers, and particularly Prime Minister, routinely refuse to turn up in parliament. Since his nomination, the Prime Minister has appeared in parliament 0 times. 0. Why is that, dear Minister?
Yeah, I think we are entering now into internal policy, which is nice, which is an indication how pluralistic is the different is the political life in Georgia. First of all, I want to very briefly, I don't want to enter into internal debates, and there are Georgian parliamentarians who can answer the claims of their colleague, but I want to mention several facts. First of all, some shrinking of support to NATO and the EU. I will just provide figures. IRI actually poll of April this year showed that there is 82% to NATO integration and 90% to the EU integration. If someone can have figures more than that, I think today it's not possible to have figures more than that, and it's not actually because of just people's commitment to the EU and NATO, but it's because of the progress we showed on both paths. On the EU integration path, association agreement, DCFTA working visa liberalization delivered, which has been delivered during the last years, and also our progress on NATO integration path, and also a very careful and very managed and reasonable communication with our public about the NATO and the EU. We are living in a world, in a situation when we have a big disinformation campaigns and open and pluralistic media, and in this environment we need to have very clear communication to keep people committed to the EU and NATO path, not to frustrate them. And we are doing that, and with that we are getting this, I think, quite recording number of support. With regards to Rustavi 2, and that this is the only TV station which is not controlled by the government, I would like to say just that is not true. I want to say that this is the only, actually, TV station to which, actually, the opposition has full control, and nothing wrong is in that. So we have in Georgia today TV stations under the control of the political opposition, which is part of the democracy, and we believe that it is good. And it has been the case during the last years. All the elections were held in this environment without any problem to the TV station. At the same time, actually, Georgian government complying with all the interests of the media pluralism. So it's not an issue for, it has not been an issue for the government unless it has directly came to government to implement the decision of the court. Actually, no decision, a decision of 3 instances, they were not implemented by the Ministry of Justice because we wanted this process to go through all the instances. And finally, when the Constitutional Court, has taken a decision with 9 judges against 0, actually, then in one day, the European Human Court has taken this interim measure, which we don't think that was needed in Georgia, but we fully respect this measure. We fully respect the decision of the court, this interim measure. And we believe that everyone, again, will be confident that Georgia fully complies with the international obligations we've taken, and also with the democratic development interests of the country. When it comes to the judiciary, I want to mention one fact also, not going into other details. Today, the independence of judiciary is reflected in the number of cases which are won against the government, against the prosecutor's office of Georgia, and these numbers are telling about the judiciary independence in Georgia, and at the same time numbers of cases sent to the European Human Courts. So we are, according to the recent statistics, on the level of Norway, with a number of cases sent to the European Court. It means that there is full confidence in the judiciary in Georgia of Georgian people. But again, as I said already, we have implemented legislative reforms, but we are having now comprehensive strategy elaborated again with the European Council together with the USAID and GIZ and the experts and NGOs together, and we will be implementing in coming 5 years this strategy, which will make sure that there is more professionalism, there is more independence and strength of judiciary in the country. So I will not enter into other political issues because they are really of internal political nature, and I thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. And as a final question, I just want to return to foreign affairs. I think it's important to note that it's been 9 years since the Russian invasion and occupation of Georgian territory. And it's been 3 years since the legal annexation of Crimea and support of the conflict in Donbass. And in many ways, the conflict in Ukraine has overshadowed the events here, and yet nothing has been resolved. One of the phrases we hear a lot about the Ukrainian conflict is that we must have dialogue with Russia. But as you indicated, over the last 9 years, I think you said 40 rounds of talks at the Geneva talks. Obviously, you have pursued a dialogue. And During that time, there was talk about resuming trade between Russia and Georgia, despite the political differences. Is there any progress there? I know for a while you were exporting products to Russia. Is that continuing? Is there any positive results in that while these other issues are still unresolved?
Yes, we actually opened an informal dialogue channel with Russia. As you know, we don't have diplomatic relations with the Russian Federation, and when it comes to the official talks, there are no official talks. The official communication with Russia is happening only through Swiss mediation, and there cannot be diplomatic relations when you have 3 embassies on your territory. And as you know, just recently, for instance, my counterpart, Foreign Minister of Russia, visited Sukhumi to open a new embassy building there. So in these circumstances, so this is unimaginable to lead any official dialogue. The informal dialogue, which is through the special representative of the Prime Minister and also the Deputy Foreign Minister from the Russian Federation, is about all issues which are not linked with the conflict. Because about the conflict issues, you rightly mentioned, we are talking about in Geneva. But to find ground to talk about on other issues like trade, people-to-people relations, transport relations, which are active as we are neighbors, and there is need of these talks. These talks have led to some progress in that regard. Now trade is happening. Although trade with Russia is not significant, it's about, if I'm not mistaken, it was in around 8% of total trade. But still, this trade is going on. And at the same time, there is tourism, there is transit going through Georgia to Russia. And these talks continue. These are talks also oriented on showing our constructive approach that not only to Russia, but also to everyone, to our partners, that we are ready to be constructive in every field and to be supportive to the political settlement and to lead process in a peaceful way, which at the same time requires respect of sovereign choices of Georgia, respect of territorial integrity, and respect of international law and principles.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Minister. I think sometimes we talk about the NATO PA bump. When we have a spring session in a country, we all become much more aware of that country. And I think 2 things that will come out of this meeting is that I think tourism here will increase for many of our countries, and also Georgian wine, I think, has gained even more fame after the last couple of days. So I want to thank the foreign minister. I think it was a very frank, very open discussion, and we got to hear about both foreign policy priorities as well as internal policy. So let's give a sound round of applause to the foreign minister, and thank you very much. Okay, now I'm going to turn the meeting over to our General Rapporteur, Rasa Yuknevichin. She has a report entitled Russia from Partner to Competitor. We've already had some references to Russia in the Foreign Minister's presentation, and I think her report gives an excellent overview of this topic, and we have a chance also to discuss the report after Rasa does her presentation. So please, it's all yours.
Thank you, Oyers. Dear friends and colleagues, I am delighted to be here with you today to present the key findings of the General Report of the Political Committee, Russia from Partner to Competitor, ? Although we do no longer have Russian delegation amongst us, Russia remains a dominant issue for the Assembly. So this report is, in a way, an update of previous reports of the Assembly. Some of the findings in the paper in front of you are similar to those that we had in earlier reports. For example, that Russia has rejected a constructive dialogue with NATO, or that Moscow openly views the alliance as its main...
Rasa, can you stop for a minute? Do we have a problem with... Oh, you've got translation. Okay.
Okay. As its main adversary. But something has changed since we last discussed Russia and Russia's foreign policy in a committee report. And this is a huge change in my opinion. What has changed is that Russia is actively undermining our political systems and in fact meddling in our parliamentary elections. The Kremlin has used intimidation against Western societies as a tool to weaken the capacity of politicians to react appropriately. We must not give in to it. But let me outline the draft report to you first. Current NATO-Russia relations are at their lowest since the end of the Cold War. Moscow's provocative stance and actions towards NATO, aggressive actions against Ukraine, Georgia, and other NATO partners undermine the stability of the whole Euro-Atlantic area and directly affect the security of the alliance. The Kremlin's dangerous behavior, its violation of the NATO-Russia Founding Act, its breaching of the international order based upon the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity, have left NATO no choice but to consider the prospect of aggressive Russian action against an alliance member as a potential threat and to adopt measured, proportionate responses. NATO's refocus on its core task of collective defense represents a significant change after its focus on crisis management operations in the Balkans and Afghanistan. This policy change was initiated at the 2014 Wales Summit and was confirmed at the Warsaw Summit in July 2016. Since the 2014 summit in Wales, NATO has been placing more focus on collective defense to address Russia's dangerous behavior. This refocus produced a number of important initiatives. NATO allies have made important decisions to strengthen deterrence and defense capabilities at NATO's southeastern flank and develop further stages of the NATO ballistic missile defense. At the 2016 summit in Warsaw, allies also agreed to bolster defensive cyber capabilities and increase their activities to counter Russia's disinformation operations. NATO has been implementing a wide range of measures in response to Russia's activities, including most recent decision to establish NATO's enhanced forward presence in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. Overall, I believe that the decisions taken at the NATO summits in Wales and Warsaw were appropriate and measured response to the challenges posed by the Kremlin. And I want to emphasize, too, that despite all the provocations from Russia, NATO continues its efforts to engage Russia and encourage constructive dialogue with Moscow. It will not be easy, but we should try. It is very difficult to develop a dialogue when one of the sides does not want that. Russia's continuing military build-up at NATO's eastern borders and the number of large military exercises in the vicinity are reason for concern. In recent years, Moscow has built an extensive anti-access area denial A2AD zone, including the high north in Murmansk, the Kola Peninsula, Kaliningrad, and the Black Sea, as well as in the eastern Mediterranean. This is potentially impeding and complicating reinforcements to Eastern NATO allies and NATO operations in these areas. Moscow announced further measures to enhance its capabilities close to NATO's borders. This includes deployment of advanced S-400 missile systems, K-300P Bastion coastal defense system, and nuclear-capable Iskander-M short-range ballistic missiles to Kaliningrad. Enhanced Russian A2AD capabilities in Kaliningrad will significantly diminish NATO's ability to defend the Eastern allies, particularly Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, and Poland. Moreover, increased Russian military presence in Crimea and a modernized Black Sea fleet could jeopardize NATO's operational capabilities in this region. Of particular concern is the large-scale military exercise Zapad 2017, scheduled to take place in September 2017. According to officials, Zapad will involve about 30,000 troops, but as it was in the past during the previous Zapad exercises, we can calculate much more troops, and experts think that it will involve almost 100 troops from Russia and Belarus. In Syria, Russia's military intervention in September 2015 has complicated the fight against Daesh and has also led to an increase of refugees fleeing the country, many of them to Europe. Moreover, Russia and Syria managed to secure a strategic position in the Mediterranean region with the help of A2AD capabilities. Back, Moscow's intervention prevented the regime of President Bashar al-Assad from collapsing. Its military assistance was instrumental in shifting the balance of power between the authoritarian Syrian regime and the opposition forces in the former's favor. So while it is true we have a shared interest with Russia in the fight against terrorist organizations like Daesh, Moscow's actions in Syria, coupled with its methods of countering terrorist organizations, have proved that Russia and Syria and NATO have conflicting goals. Although the Kremlin has repeatedly claimed that the Russian military intervention in Syria is targeting Daesh, the vast majority of the Russian attacks were aimed at groups opposing the Assad regime and not at the extremist group. Indeed, Moscow's strategy of indiscriminate airstrikes in Syria has contributed to further radicalization and increased motivation to join terrorist groups. In contrast, NATO allies and NATO member states recognized that the terrorist organization cannot be countered or defeated solely with military means. The report also looks closely at Russia's increasing influence in NATO partner countries. Russia's foreign and security policies are strongly informed by the notion of the near abroad, which marks the zone of Moscow's historic and unchallenged influence. This zone includes the entire area encompassing the Caucasus, the Greater Black Sea region, and the Eastern Mediterranean. Moscow policies towards the countries of the near abroad are aimed at stifling their attempts to move closer to the West. A security vacuum is what provokes the Kremlin the most. Therefore, NATO's partnership with Ukraine and Georgia must be effective in order to help fill in the security vacuum. Therefore, NATO allies and indeed the international community need to continue and intensify their political and financial support for the country. An independent, stable, and prosperous Ukraine is important for regional security. Ukraine's success in implementing reforms is, in my view, the only instrument for the West to stimulate positive developments in Russia. A successful Ukraine will provide an example for other countries, including Russia, to follow and introduce necessary reforms. And the same applies to Georgia. Georgia is a close NATO partner. It is valued and active contributor to NATO. Georgia has made and continues to make significant progress towards membership. They need and deserve our support, particularly as the threat from Russia continues. NATO has to take bolder steps forward with its open door policy because the awareness that the Kremlin is feared is what provokes it the most. Georgia is an aspirant country that has achieved the greatest progress towards membership. Finally, the alliance is facing a completely new set of security challenges posed by Russia, as last year's presidential elections in the United States clearly demonstrated. Russian activities to influence public opinion in NATO member and partner countries are cause for considerable concern. Officials from Western intelligence agencies have repeatedly warned that Russia is using the culture of free speech in the democracies of NATO member countries to disinform and mislead target audiences. During the visit of the Subcommittee on NATO Partnerships to the Baltic countries this spring, Yanis Sartris, director of the NATO Strategic Communication Center of Excellence in Riga, informed us that the Russian information strategy carefully maps vulnerabilities in NATO member countries and creates an information fog by spreading false narratives and conspiracy theories. This approach aims at putting Western value systems in question as it conveys a narrative to the public where truth does not exist. Thus, with targeting disinformation and propaganda, the Kremlin tries to undermine public confidence in governments and institutions and disrupt our democratic systems. As a result, populist parties on the extreme ends of the political spectrum have gained support in our countries. Their xenophobic and Eurosceptic narratives constitute a major threat to the democratic systems of NATO member states and to the cohesion of the EU. The rise of populist forces in alliance member states could impact future defense budgets and national foreign policy priorities. And the Kremlin is likely to use intimidation and misinformation to exploit diverging national policies of NATO member states on important topics with the detrimental consequences for the cohesion of the alliance. It is important to note that the Russian attempts to destabilize our democratic systems compound the challenges that NATO allies are facing. The report concludes with an important reminder that NATO should remain committed to a strong deterrence posture and support all efforts to adapt the alliance to a dynamically changing security environment. The security threats to NATO's eastern flank remains as Russia continues its dangerous policy course towards the alliance. Russia will likely keep putting pressure on NATO and its partners to test the alliance unity. While NATO should continue seeking ways for engaging Russia in a constructive dialogue, the alliance must be clear about communicating its red lines to Russia. If NATO allies don't counter the Kremlin's provocative behavior, Moscow will continue this approach. Therefore, and to avoid potential miscalculations by Russian decision makers, NATO allies need to signal to the Kremlin the red lines which it must not overstep. This is also important as the Kremlin pursues its aggressive nuclear rhetoric and had allegedly deployed a land-based cruise missile that violates the spirit and intent of the 1987 Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, which bans ground-launched ballistic and cruise missiles with ranges between 500 and 5,500 kilometers. In closing, let me point out that there was a mistake in the printed version of the report that you have in front of you, technical. In paragraph 25, the first and the second sentences have been mixed up. Sentences 1 and 2 of paragraph 25 should correctly read as follows, and I cite, "Moreover, NATO allies could consider expanding the remit of the NATO Strategic Communications Center of Excellence, whose task is currently limited to analysis into the operational area." Finally, your rapporteur greatly welcomes that the President of NATO Parliamentary Assembly, Paolo Ali, has made it a priority of his presidency to focus on education and communication about NATO. This error has meanwhile been corrected on the website, but we only realized it after the material for the session had already been printed. I stop here, but before we engage in a discussion, I would like to thank you research assistants, and particularly Maciej Lemke, and of course Stefan Sachs, for their valuable assistance in putting this draft report together. Thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to your comments and suggestions.
Well, thank you very much, Rasa. I also just wanted to point out that the Zapad 2017 exercises, which will bring over 100,000 Russian troops just across the border from the Baltic states, will coincide with the Estonian presidency of the European Union in the second half of this year. So it's just another fact to note. So far we have three questions or comments, and the first comes from Baroness Ramsey from the UK.
Thank you. First of all, thank you to the rapporteur for a very comprehensive and very thoroughly researched paper, which has some very strong and direct comments in it, which we have come to expect from Rasa. I mean that as a compliment. I just wanted to make a couple of points from the British point of view. We have some detailed points that we would make, but we will give them in writing to the Secretariat for consideration by the rapporteur, and then we'll dealt with in the autumn meeting. First of all, I would like to say that we remain very concerned about the increased Russian interference in the Western Balkans. And in particular, we're concerned about reports of what appears to be a Russian-backed attempted coup plot on the election day in Montenegro. And secondly, we consider that NATO's plans for enhanced forward presence, the EFP, represents a really proportionate reinforcement of NATO's collective defence, as indeed the rapporteur was calling for, especially in the current European security context. EFP represents a robust demonstration of NATO's unity and resolve to deter aggression, and its aggression against any ally. And I think it's very, very important in the present European security climate that that's what's needed as an action by all of our alliance. But thank you, Raza, for a good report.
Do you want to respond?
Okay, as I understood, these are proposals, especially on Balkans. Of course, we will do our best to include your amendments, I would say, and thank you for your concerns. And thank you, Great Britain, for participation in enhanced forward presence. They are in Estonia already deploying their troops, so that is really what we call solidarity in NATO. People know that, and my voters, people in my constituency all over Lithuania, they support. You have great support. Germans, other countries, Canada, United States. I will not say about. Not to mention all of nations. About 80%. According to last opinion polls, in Lithuania support NATO presence in my country.
Okay, our next question comes from Lord Campbell, who hails from Karl Lammer's favorite location, Pittenweem. Please, Lord Campbell.
I'll be very happy to take my friend Carl on a visit to Pittenweem. I don't know if he's been before, but we can certainly make an occasion of it. May I echo the sentiments expressed by my colleague Baroness Ramsay and reinforce the view that with detailed amendments of the kind we have in mind, it's much easier and perhaps more productive if we submit them in writing. But there's, there's one matter which has attracted my attention, and it is in paragraph 16, where it appears on page 5, but it's the last sentence of that paragraph which we find on page 6. And our rapporteur, again, to whom I extend my thanks and compliments, will be aware that it reads, the Allies should therefore consider increasing NATO's footprint in Poland, the Baltic countries, and in Romania, and deploy additional forces permanently. That is a very major step for the Allies. It's a very major step for NATO itself, and it would actually be a very major step for countries in which such forces were to be positioned permanently. And it respectfully seems to me that we really would require a rather greater justification before proceeding in that way. And similarly, since we are at pains, and indeed the rapporteur has certainly followed this, to talk about appropriate and measured responses, it seems to me to make a decision involving permanent deployment lies in the face of that proportionality which we have always regarded as being fundamental to our contribution to deployment. So in the circumstances, I would invite the rapporteur to consider whether or not, at this particular stage, that sentence is an appropriate one, and also to make the point that while we are able to rely on the terms of the NATO-Russian Founding Act and to use Russia's breaches of that as an argument in any political discussion, the permanent stationing of forces could well be argued to be a breach of that. Our moral authority in arguing against the Russian position would, in my view, be undermined by a statement at this stage that we wish permanent deployment of NATO forces in the countries affected.
Thank you very much for your important question, I would say. Yes, discussion is going. We are members of parliament. We can't avoid discussions going. We are looking what our military are saying, military experts are saying, including NATO leading generals in Europe. I mean, General Scaparotti and others, when they are witnessing in Congress in the United States, he is saying that they need more capabilities in eastern flank. So we can't avoid discussions, and we just put on the table these discussions. I can quote General Bridlow, former senior general in Europe, in NATO in Europe. When he was in Vilnius, he mentioned that Warsaw, doesn't mean that we already came into the last decisions. We just going through. Warsaw it means we are going through Warsaw. What does it mean? It means that maybe it will be not enough what we have now. Yes, today it's proportional deployments, but we don't know what will happen in few years. So we have to be ready just to discuss about that. And I don't think that we have to speak about any violation of NATO-Russian Act, because Russia already violated heavily, and this act mentioning the situation, current situation was in 1997. Situation today is totally different. So it doesn't mean that we can't defend NATO territory because of the act which was in 1997. Situation is totally different. Of course, so I will finish answering your question that it is a discussion now. So as members of parliament, we have to be in the center of the discussions. They are going with our military and with the top politicians in NATO.
Perhaps on this particular issue that Lord Campbell raised, and if Russia would accept it, and perhaps rather than the word permanently, we put in for as long as necessary. I think that phrase has been used in the past, rather than permanently, but for as long as necessary.
In the future.
That would just be my suggestion as a compromise on this particular
Perhaps
phrase.
we might take it away and make our position clear in the detailed material which we intend to produce in due course. Thank you.
Our next comment is from Costa Neves from Portugal.
Yes, thank you. Thank you also for this excellent report. Thank you and congratulations. Congratulations also for the cartoons, for the effective message that comes from the cartoons. So, disinformation campaign, fake news, cyber attacks, hackers, election interference, financing of populist political forces against our countries and against the European Union, undermining confidence of the citizens. So a long list, a long record, a real threat. And I have one or two questions about this. First one, if we are being succeeded establishing a nexus between all these actions from Russia, reporting specific cases, proving specific cases to our public opinion. And one linked question to this one is that if we in this area have enough capabilities to fight this kind of aggression. In one sentence, are we doing enough in this field? Thank you.
Thank you very much. As medical doctor, I have to say that first of all, we have to have the right diagnosis. So today, when we are speaking about information warfare, about fake news, of course, it's half job done. Why? Because 3-4 years ago, nobody was speaking about that. Despite fake news, information warfare, we in the Baltic states, other countries like Georgia, Ukraine, everywhere, we were facing long time ago. And you remember that very many people, they didn't want even to listen about that. Today, everybody agree, especially after the cases in the United States, other countries, many people open their eyes and they are informing their own people that news can be fake news. On the other hand, you are right. Asking question and together giving an answer that we don't have enough instruments to fight. Of course, I have my understanding, but maybe not everybody will agree on that. I will give you Ukrainian example. If we agree that Kremlin-owned internet media, I can't say media, television, they are not media. They are propaganda or information warfare tools. They are, the target is brain, or target is thinking of the people, mood in the societies. So if we agree that they have powerful tool to influence, so we first of all have not name it media at all. Because media is media in democratic countries, as we understand, free media, but not media when Kremlin is paying thousands and thousands of money just to destroy the democratic societies. So that's why I understand Ukrainian, decisions to stop weapons broadcasting in their own country. For me, it's very difficult to understand why in every hotel I find Russia Today. Sometimes as main, channel for information. Of course, it's difficult to make decision just to stop it. I understand this. But we have to think how to do that. For example, in Lithuania, we made a proposal to use the same tool as we are doing with smoking. When you are buying cigarettes, you can buy them and smoke, but you are getting information that is dangerous for your health. So why not to label some channels saying dangerous? You can be poisoned by misinformation or something like that. So these are just my proposals. It's not I don't know that any country can use that, but why not to think about that? Just to think about that.
Thank you. Our next comment is from Raynal Andreychuk from Canada.
Thank you. I want to go back to that paragraph on page 6, paragraph 16, and that last sentence. Two difficulties for me would be using the term NATO's footprint in Poland. I think NATO is a member and it isn't a footprint. It carries a connotation that I think is not what you intended. And also permanent. I was going to make the comment. At one point we said that we didn't want to have a presence on the eastern flank. It would be a provocation to Russia. Well, the provocation has come and the illegal violations have come from Russia. So what we're really talking about is capability and readiness, and that will change from time to time if Russia does not respond. And so whether it's a question of permanency, I'm not sure is the right word, it's the presence of capability and readiness in any form that we need to, which means NATO should have more than one plan, should be ready to implement it, and very quickly and efficiently. By just putting the permanency in there would not be a proper response. I want to thank you for the report. You've covered a lot of ground and you've synthesized it, and that's always difficult because it's in the nuances. One area I'd like you to consider before we finalize this report is that you talk about Russia and its violations into Ukraine, Georgia, Syria. But what you don't touch is the attack on the international order that we have spent so many decades building. And so I see the movements of Russia not just on those types of violations, but the actions they're taking. For example, where the arms are now in Burundi coming from Russia, where Venezuela is at risk, where the United Nations is not listened to. So there is an attempt, I think, to disrupt an international order that we support and NATO's values support. And if somewhere you could put that in the report, I think it would be helpful and more current for what is going on. But thank you for a comprehensive report otherwise.
Thank you, Raynal. And of course, I welcome both comments on paragraph 16. Finally, most important is that we have to have really comprehensive and strong NATO in every flank inside NATO. So wording is not the most important thing. So I am flexible and open to discuss the wording of 16th paragraph. And I think that we agree on the essence of the situation. So, and thank you very much reminding more Russian activities in other countries, and we would, I think we would be able to fulfill, to enhance our report with new paragraphs on that.
Thank you. And our next comment is from Congressman Rob Bishop from Utah.
Thank you. And I want to commend Madam Rapporteur for your excellent report, as well as a very articulate presentation of it. I think it's very grateful to go into these new areas of cyber attacks, which are unique, as well as what has to be the most ironic of euphemisms called modernization of the Russian military, especially in places like Kaliningrad. I would like, though, to try and draw your attention to another traditional form of Russian pressure on the NATO areas, which we have talked about, that may be considered in at least another paragraph in this report, and that is dealing with energy and energy consumption, especially in infrastructure, in the delivery system of energy and how it is used by the Russian pressure, even on things like where new nuclear power plants will be built that may have an indirect pressure on somebody else. I would like the committee to simply or you to consider maybe another element or addition to that in that particular area. I would also like to ask you to look once again at what I see as simply an inartful sentence on paragraph 12 at the very beginning, that indeed it may be the Kremlin's idea that they want a counteroffensive against Western encroachment on Russia. But it just rankles me to think that the ideas of self-determination of countries like Latvia or Lithuania or others could simply be defined away as an encroachment on Russian activities. Perhaps a rephrasing of that, even though that is trying to say what the Russians view it as, a rephrasing of that to simply say that the goals of former Soviet territories have, and indeed a validity far above something that's simply an encroachment on Russian viewpoint or Russian activities. Maybe a rephrasing of that would be somewhat helpful if you can consider those. Other than that, I do compliment you on what I think is simply a superb report. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much. Of course, thank you for your some amendments, oral amendments on paragraph 12. On energy, yes, of course, it's a little bit strange that me, being from Lithuania, I didn't speak on energy security because we were facing long time this dependence. All countries like Lithuania around Russia, those they were incorporated into Soviet Union. We had infrastructure built during Soviet period, so of course dependence was huge. Today we did a lot, and other countries too. I will not go into the details. In Lithuania and Vilnius, we have energy security, NATO Energy Security Center of Excellence. They are doing researches on energy security. It's utmost important, of course, and I will think about that. We thought that it's not necessary to put everything Russia is doing or has interest into one report, because we had reports, separate reports in other committees on energy security, on information warfare, on cyber security. There are many reports on that. So here we wanted to have some kind of consolidation of everything. But of course, I appreciate your comments on that. It's important, very important.
Thank you. And our next comment is from Mikheil JANELIDZE of France.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. Il faut bien sûr féliciter notre rapporteur pour ce rapport très complet et très précis. Il fait le constat que nous faisons tous d'un échec du partenariat avec la Russie au regard de l'objectif fixé par l'acte fondateur, donc des relations entre l'OTAN et la Russie de 1997. Et bien sûr, malheureusement, ni la tentative du président Obama, ni même la bienveillance dont a fait preuve le président Trump vis-à-vis de la Russie en tout début de mandat n'ont permis de changer la donne. La Russie va par conséquent rester un interlocuteur difficile dans le cadre d'une concurrence stratégique très claire, mais nous avons intérêt à rester unis et vigilants pour éviter tout risque d'escalade et tout risque de dérapage, en particulier, comme vous l'avez souligné, Monsieur le Président, lorsque des exercices militaires russes à nos frontières prennent une dimension provocatrice. Et en ce sens, je partage les remarques de nos collègues sur la fin du paragraphe 16 et la proposition que vous faites en conséquence. La partie du rapport relative à l'effort de défense russe est très intéressante et je pense qu'elle pourrait être complétée par la mention de données corrigées d'un coefficient déflateur permettant, en parité de pouvoir d'achat, de comprendre comment un pays qui a un PIB moyen et un budget militaire nominal correspondant à celui de nos voisins, par exemple du Royaume-Uni, est en mesure de fournir un tel effort et représente pour nous un défi stratégique à un niveau aussi élevé. Si de telles études n'existent pas, mais elles existent, je le sais, nous devrions recommander à nos collègues d'en faire une, car ce serait instructif pour nous de comprendre les facteurs qui permettent à la Russie de rester à ce niveau de compétition stratégique avec l'Ouest, mais bien sûr avec d'autres pays tels que la Chine. Mais je voudrais bien sûr finalement remercier notre rapporteur pour cet excellent rapport. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. I will look carefully, as I already said on paragraph 16. I will not go back to that. There are no studies on GDP spendings, yeah? No. And I would like to comment a little bit on Zapad. Few more comments, already did that. I do think that today they have Kremlin, they have one very important target. And the main target is not to stop further NATO enlargement. And they would like to show that, look, there are some problems around Baltic states, around those newcomers, and so on and so on. And these exercises also is part of their policy of threatening to spread fear around NATO nations and to prevent further decisions. So we have to be cautious, and my main message is that today, maybe it will be surprisingly to you, I would ask my colleagues and NATO alliance not to be afraid, Russia, because they like that we are afraid. And then we can't take proper, maybe, decisions we need, and our partners in other countries like Georgia and Ukraine need. So NATO today, as I know from our from our defense ministry, we just had in our committee, National Security and Defense Committee, briefings on Zapad before I came here. NATO is ready today much more than it was 2013 or 2009, when they were elaborating almost the same size, this time a little bit higher, but is ready to protect Baltic countries and NATO alliance. Of course, provocations are possible. Concentration of so huge military from different sides is always a little bit dangerous. So we have to be cautious on some provocations. But on the other hand, first of all, we, NATO, we are much stronger. We have much more capabilities. We are stronger in our economies, not Lithuania itself, but NATO as alliance. So why we have to be afraid of Russia? We just have to little bit reinforce, change our decision-making system, and I think we have to make necessary decisions not to allow Russia to act as it was acting until now.
Thank you. And our next comment, I believe, was from our Romanian delegate, Mr. Shitak.
Thanks, Russia, for your professional work. You have been able to summarize what is very important in this topic. Very good and comprehensive work. Only two short comments. In paragraph 17, discuss among other things about the Russia defense spending, and below we see a table with the relevant defense budget finished in 2016. I think we can complete this table with the figures for the next 2 years, special for USA. We know that USA has a multi-annual budget for defense. And second comments, it's something in the line of previous intervention speaking about the energy. We have discussed in this report the troubled relationship only from the military point of view. Putting face-to-face Russia and NATO, special at NATO's eastern flank from the perspective on military capabilities and military personnel. Because you discussed about Ukraine, I want to emphasize that Russia is not only a military power. Russia is a gas power. From this perspective, we know that more than 1/3 of gas consumed in Europe comes from Russia and create a strong dependence of Europe from Russia. To be more exact, I speak about Nord Stream 2 project, having intention to start next year. There are countries which is for example, Germany, and against, for example, Poland. Fulfilling this project certainly will have a stronger dependence from Russia, and for sure, there is a risk of destabilizing Ukraine, I think. Therefore, according to my opinion, when we analyze the relationship between NATO and Russia in Europe, we must take into account some economic initiative which can affect the security of Europe. Thank you.
Thank you for your insights. I share your understanding and opinion. Unfortunately, especially on Nord Stream, but decision is done.
Okay, and the last comment comes from a delegate from a country that's been mentioned several times this morning, Ukraine. Irina Friz from Ukraine.
Господин председатель, мадам докладчик, огромное спасибо за ваш доклад. Он очень в полной мере освещает те методы, которые использует сегодня Россия в рамках неконвенционной войны, уже не только против Украины, но и против других стран. На самом деле современные войны начинаются с подготовки, которая включает в себя очень широкое использование именно информационных средств и средств коммуникаций. И тот факт, что вы его подчеркнули в своем докладе, очень важный, потому что очень часто мы недооцениваем, что против нас война уже ведется. К сожалению, мы имеем горький опыт в Украине, когда против нас уже велась война, которая начиналась с информационной подготовки, с действительно борьбы, войны за умы. Мы ее проиграли, эту первую фазу. Мы сейчас пытаемся противостоять информационной пропаганде, и мы, на самом деле, запретив российские телеканалы, полностью разделяем тезис генерального секретаря Альянса о том, что НАТО никогда не будет бороться пропагандой против пропаганды. Путин открыл ящик Пандоры. Все мы теперь должны с этим справиться. И вы абсолютно правы, что мы должны быть сильны, и мы сможем противостоять, потому что именно наша разобщенность, знаете, как разделяй и властвуй, он очень активно использует этот принцип. Поэтому именно наша солидарность, именно наша сплоченность поможет нам качественно противостоять. Мне очень близок ваш тезис относительно угрозы терроризму. В 2016 году в штаб-квартире НАТО мы передали информацию, материал, доклад относительно того, что делает Путин в Крыму. Каким образом он фактически сегодня превращает цветущий когда-то украинский полуостров, жемчужину украинскую, в милитарную базу, современную, которая будет направлена, вы абсолютно правы, уже против членов стран НАТО. Я хочу сказать, что ваш тезис относительно угрозы терроризма тоже абсолютно правилен и объективен. Позвольте передать вам доклад, который мы подготовили в Украине относительно взаимодействия России с террористическими организациями, каналы их коммуникации и координации. Я думаю, что он может быть не лишним и, возможно, будет использован в вашем докладе на финальной стадии. Еще раз позвольте вам сказать слова искренней благодарности от Украины и украинской делегации за ваш доклад, за то, что вы держите в фокусе внимания то, что творит Россия в мире. Спасибо.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ukraine. I would like to use the opportunity to say one more important thing. Not you have to thank us. But we have to thank you because you are defending European and democratic values in eastern Ukraine. We in Lithuania understand that front line to defend my country is going in Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rasa, and I want to thank her for the report and especially our delegates for your contributions. I think this was a very good discussion, and we have earned a coffee break, actually 6 minutes early. So we can break for coffee, and I'll be back here at 11:30. Since we have an early break, I think we could all make it back on time. We have more good discussions to follow. Thank you.